Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. Today I am filming a book review and I am gonna review The Bookweaver's Daughter by Malavika Kannan. And can we appreciate before going into the review that I have this hole here that was like really prominent in the frame right now. Either way, if you can hear the banging, it's my nephew, so ignore that and let's move on. The Bookweaver's Daughter is being released on the 8th of September and it was a book that I was really excited for. It was on my most anticipated releases list. I saw it around on Twitter and a lot of people were talking about it and knew it was an Indian inspired fantasy, Own Voices author, and I was really excited for it. And then before starting the book that I got from NetGalley after I filmed September TBRs, that is why it's not there, I saw that it had gotten a lot of negative reviews with low star ratings. That banging is really annoying, isn't it? Please stop. We just have to live with it. You just have to live with it. I'm sorry. It's really loud though. Either way, as I said, I saw a lot of negative reviews and I was really surprised by this because I hadn't really been keeping up. And then I kept this in mind as I went into it, but I of course still wanted to read it for myself, to know what I thought about it, because I like to read it for myself, even though a lot of people don't like your thing, because that's fine. Not that the issue here was just that people didn't like it, it was more than that, but I will get into it as we go along. The Bookweaver's Daughter is set in an ancient Indian kingdom called Kashmir, and it is obviously inspired by an actual place in India called Kashmir, if I have gotten things correctly. It follows 14-year-old Reya, who is the Bookweaver's daughter, and the Bookweaver is basically a person who can make the things they write in books come to life on certain conditions, if I remember correctly. And the Bookweaver has been believed dead the last 7 years, and then he's been living in this cottage thing outside the city, and Reya has been going into the city to work there as a laborer slash, I would say, slave. Great. One day her father, well, he's not taken as it says in the synopsis on Goodreads that I checked to see if I remember everything correctly, but he's gone, and then she is now the Bookweaver, and then she has to go on a run together with her best friend Maya because the government is a bad word, the ruling peeps wants to take her for reasons unknown right now. It then starts out on this journey. They have to go in hiding because the prince is hunting them, and yeah, it's really bad. Okay, they're trying to get to freedom, but will they make it? Probably not. It's a YA fantasy. Concept of this book is really fun. It is a girl with hidden magic, forbidden magic, and I need to go out on this journey to avoid being captured. It's not a concept that we are unknown to, and it's a concept I hope we like, because like that's a lot of YA fantasy, and it is Indian inspired and its Own Voices author, and what could go wrong? A lot of things apparently. So how to cover this review? First of all, I would say that the book reads really lower YA, so it's nothing wrong with that, but it reminded me at times a bit of like a middle grade more than a YA, and I was gonna say quite a lot, but I think I don't read as much middle grade as I think I do, but I love middle grade. Like, it's a YA book, and it's supposed to be for teens, so this read very much like so than like compared to some other YA books that almost feel into new adults sometimes. And that is just an observation. We do know that the author, when she wrote this book, she was only 17 years old, so that could be clear in a way that it was written. It makes it more accessible to the younger, I was gonna say the younger people who wants to pick this book up, because it was written as a teen should be, and not as an adult pretending to be a teen. Now, as I said, this book has gotten quite a bit of different criticism, and most of that is... And a thing that it has gotten a lot of feedback on is the representation in the book, the Indian representation, because this is, as I said, an Indian inspired fantasy, and people, Own Voices reviewers, has said that the representation for them has not really worked well, and that it, for example, mixes a lot of different Asian representation in one, and it feels like for them that the research has not been done really well. Of course, different people can have different experiences just because something is Own Voices. I'm never gonna disregard that. So let's say you have an Own Voices book about depression, another person with depression might not feel that that representation of depression fits with their experience with depression. But this is more about the words used in the book, where the words really come from, from, and other things that happened in real life Kashmir that the author did not take into consideration when she wrote this book that seems very insensitive from what I have read. And again, I am not from India, so I can't speak on representation in this book, but I wanted to mention that Own Voices reviewers have spoken up concerns about the representation, and I can speak for everyone because maybe another person would read it and maybe feel like the representation for them is good. But we need to keep in consideration that she has done insensitive things considering the political climate there, as I think correctly. I really recommend going on Goodreads and try to find Own Voices reviews for this, just to have it in mind when you read a book, but that doesn't mean that you can't enjoy it and think that the book is cool for you, but just have this in mind when reading it. We need to be aware of these things, so going forward. That being said, and if I, as a person who is not Indian and would maybe not think about the representation as much, like of course you should always think about it, but since it's not me being represented, it's easier to disregard this and I'm gonna just think about the story a bit, because as I said, I can't talk about how things are represented in the book. And in the story itself, I don't think this story is solid enough for me, just like the story alone. First of all, I did notice as well, even not being an Own Voices reviewer, that the Indian parts of the story, I feel like they should be much more explored upon, and I like missed more details and more magic, and I feel like everything was very weirdly explained for me. So they explained one thing and then I mentioned it again like over and over, that one thing, and I just don't know why they kept repeating that one thing, and then other things they just kind of disregarded. I'm saying that one thing really vaguely because it's kind of a spoiler. I'm gonna try to go a bit deeper. It's not really a spoiler actually, I don't know what I'm saying. So the main character is a bookweaver and she can use this bookweaver power when she goes into this state. It's not really a spoiler, but this state, they say, can only be achieved once, and I said that once in the book, and then they kind of said, if I remember correctly, they kind of didn't mention it again. So that was really weird for me because it didn't feel consistent. It's kind of a spoiler, but they want her to use this power. I just think that part didn't make sense because she can use the power however she wants to. So why would she do what they say? That's all I gotta say to that. And if you read the book, you know what I mean. It just didn't make sense that way. And there was other parts in the book that just didn't feel like it made logical sense. We have them going on a run and then they meet these people that like should be wary about strangers, but they just take them in and take the word for everything they say. Why would they do that? They don't know who they are, they don't know if they're lying, and they just took them into their secret lair and just like did not care that who they took in there. And I was like, so these people survived these last few years like this? It was really strange. Also, as I said, it's been 7 years, and I feel like when they talked about the time passing, like the bookweaver being gone, it just feel like 7 years is not that long to talk about it. They talked about it like it was like 100 years ago, but 7 years is not that long in my opinion, but of course it can feel really long for the people struggling in that time. We also had like the magic was not allowed in this kingdom, and I also thought that was strange because we had people with magic who hid it, and then we had people with magic who worked for the people who said that magic was not allowed. And I feel like this could have been so much more explored because people who hid the magic, there was just like suddenly people had magic, and I was like, oh, had it hidden because it was not allowed, but still we had people working for the kingdom with magic, and I was just like, but wouldn't in theory they also be working, or could only a certain people be working for the ruling peeps that I don't remember the names of? And they never like explored it, like why this one person could be working for them and why no one else could be working for them. I get that other people might not want to work for them because they were assholes and had like hunted down people with magic, and that's really bad, and that's why they hid it. But like, why was this one person there working for them? What was the reason? I mean, never got one. So I just felt like it was illogical that we had this one character that could be working for them and then all of the other ones were like not. I went really deep into that, but like it was one thing that didn't make sense to me because this was never explained. The writing works. It's like you don't understand everything that's going on. It feels a bit young, as I said, but it makes it fun. But it is very much like a book where there's no quiet moments. Try to move forward the book all the time. So when a plot twist happens, when a battle happens, it never has weight to it because we never built up to that battle or built up to that plot twist. The plot twist in turns just comes upon you and you never got to build up for it, so you don't care when it happens. That was probably my biggest turn off to the story. Things were happening, but there was never any build up for it, so it did just happen. I was just like, oh, okay, we just skipped all the big moments, kinda. That's how the story feels like. So that was a bit yeah. And then we have this relationship between Reya and Maya that kinda almost, I would say, baits us a bit into a sapphic romance between them, but then they're just like, oh, we will love each other as sisters. But they were literally like 100 pages ago, okay, the 100 was a lot, it's a 250 pages book. The 50 pages ago was like, oh my god, I would die for you, I love you, and I would die for you. And then the next day were just like, oh, we love each other as sisters. And I was just like, okay, so I have mixed feelings about that, but it was never confirmed to be a queer romance or anything like that, I would say. But it just had this vibe, and I was disappointed it didn't work out. So overall, if you shouldn't look away from it, that's a bad expression, but I was going to say, if you look away from the representation issues, I think the story itself as it stands, like, if I just look away from the representation that it should have had and the research that should have been done, I think the story itself alone is not that strong. I think the execution was not done well. I think like the story had potential, it would be a fun concept, but it just doesn't bring it. I think like the whole idea of the Bookweaver, just the idea of the story, and I could see the story just needing more flesh on the bone. We only got a really tiny bone, and I think it needed more flesh. Like, it could have been longer, it was only 250 pages long. I think like if it was longer, it could have explored more, have more quiet moments in between, actually build up to the moments that was going to happen, and then the story would have been so much stronger. And of course, done more research for the representation it was gonna bring in, even though it's an own voices book. So I can speak of the experience of the author, but it's just a thing to keep in mind. As I said from the beginning, I can say if the representation is good or bad, but I can read other reviews that have it in mind when reading it. As I said, I think like the Indian parts and everything in the book should have been explored more anyway, but that's just, I think, an issue the book had in general, where everything should have been explored more. And yeah, definitely more research, but as I said, I don't know those stories as much. So, but just the relationships, the plot, and how it was written, how the story was delivered, everything should have been worked more on. I was really disappointed. I thought that after I read like bad reviews and I was going to read a book, I was just gonna be like, yeah, but okay, if the representation is bad, I get that it has a low rating, but maybe the story is more solid. But it wasn't. The story was actually just really disappointed. It kind of just wanted to skip to all the big moments, and then nothing had value, as I said, and this review is everywhere. I ended up giving it like 2 stars. I really rarely rate 1 star unless like I absolutely detest it, and I didn't hate it. I'm just more disappointed in the execution of the story, and it makes me sad because I want a woman of color to succeed, and I don't want that a book that gets a lot of bad reviews, etc., will ruin the rest of her career or anything, because I definitely think that she has potential to write better story in the future. Done more research and maybe like execute the idea you have, for me at least, a bit better. But I can see some people maybe enjoying this, but I think that they should keep in mind the representation. But I think like some could have fun with it, but for me, I wouldn't recommend it. And yeah, but I would be curious to see her future books and see if, look out for the reviews on that one and see if the things that I issue with in this one would improve, and then definitely be curious to check that out, because I do want to support own voices and authors of color, especially women of color. So yeah, and yeah, I think that covers what I want to say. Generally, I just had, for me, a lot of story issues with it because the execution didn't work for me, and as I said, things didn't make sense because illogically it didn't make sense. No impact in it for me, sadly. And yeah, I think that's it for this review. I'm sorry for all the noise. I hope you got what I said in this, and I hope I sometimes make sense. Sometimes I don't know what I'm saying anymore. I'm gonna go. Bye!